welcome to another episode of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? I'm your host, Karen E. Osborne, and I am so glad that you're back. Welcome, welcome. If this is your first time because you heard Debbie was going to be on, and so you just joined us for the first time, welcome. Today I am interviewing Debbie Weiss. And at first I went to her website and I lifted some of the things that she said about the book. But then I found some wonderful reviews and I decided I'd share those with you instead. So here's what one best-selling author said about Debbie's book, Available as Is. That's its name. Hold up your book, Debbie. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that a great cover? All right, so here's what a top-selling author said. With unflinching honesty, Weiss lays out her road from loving marriage to grieving widow to dating again. Eye-opening to some and painfully relatable to others. Available as is a brave, authentic, and exceedingly validating for others working to find love in these disconnected times. Doesn't that sound intriguing? Welcome, welcome, Debbie. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you for having me, Karen. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, I'm delighted. So one of the things, so your book, it came out of sad circumstances, right? Your husband died very young and unexpectedly.
Yeah, he was 53. That's pretty young. And he died of cancer. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the age of my almost the age of my oldest child, who's been married for 20 years. So I can relate how scary that would be. And then, and he was your high school sweetheart, right? And how soon after his death did you decide to write this book? Where in the grieving process did this book fit in?
Well, I'd always enjoyed writing. I put that on hold a bit when he passed. I'm a retired attorney, so I hadn't worked for a while. And about 6 months after he died, I got a little bit into writing again. I started to take a class, and then from there, I got into a few months later a group of very intense writers from the class who were all writing books. So we were all meeting twice a week. And this was really meaningful to me because I was pretty lonely after he died. I'd been retired for a while. So it was wonderful to have, twice a week I met with friends and we wrote and we talked all about that. And that was wonderful. And then I just got more serious. I guess got kind of intenser about it. I started to look at, I started to publish some articles here and there that was meaningful. It suggested to me maybe somebody else would want to read what I have to say. And then I started to write more and finally hired an editor. And then in 2018, I went back to college and got a master's of fine arts in creative nonfiction in writing.
Wow, that's impressive. So after law school and all of that, you went back to school.
I know.
That's very, very cool. Don't you find the writing community so supportive? It's such a wonderful community, fellow creatives. I really love that. So one of the things that I didn't put in the little intro, but had intrigued me, is you described the book as darkly funny. What did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's not really funny to be widowed, but it is funny to be dating again, particularly with the perspective of somebody dating in the modern world who hadn't dated since 1980. When my husband passed, I hadn't dated since 1980 when I was 17. And the world had changed. And unfortunately, I believe the quality of men had severely declined. And I found the situations I was in and the people I was meeting to be pretty hilarious.
So it's the men that are funny in your book.
Yeah, the men are funny, and sometimes just the surrealistic feeling of being on your own when you've spent most of your life as sort of half of a couple, as a we. There's something a little humorous sometimes about sort of saying, "Oh, we don't like tomato soup," but it's like, wait a minute, he's been gone 4 years. I like tomato soup,
Yeah. Yes, yes. I've been married for 54 years to
Oh,
the
yes.
same guy. So I can't even imagine. There's just, there's this melding, right? This melding of lives. You really talk about discovering yourself though, after this. What do you want readers to take away? Who is your ideal reader? And and what do you want them to take away from your book?
Well, my ideal reader is not only a widow, but mainly midlife women who find themselves unexpectedly alone at midlife and are trying to formulate a life, create a life on their own as individuals, particularly after a long relationship.
Yeah. And what do you
And
want them to take away from it?
what I want to take them to take away is that you can create a great life and you can have passions and interests, and maybe even those you thought you disregarded years ago, but that it takes a lot longer than you think it will, particularly for someone who's been widowed. I mean, it took me about 3 years to have a brain again. 2 years probably to read a book without, jumping up and running around. I had my husband's death was difficult, so I had some stress issues, some PTSD. So, but I want to take away that you can have a great life and you can do wonderful things and find joy again, but it takes way longer than you think it will, and not to judge yourself in the process. We make it harder when we're hard on ourselves, and to
That's
just to love ourselves and treat ourselves gently as we try to essentially become new people. Because when you've always been half a couple and then you're on your own, you're forming a new self, and that's important and that's hard.
and be patient with yourself, right? Be
Yes,
patient
yes,
with yourself. That is
yes.
so important. Um, so you already given our audience a couple of pieces of good advice, about taking time and knowing that it's going to take time and being gentle with yourself and patient with yourself. Is there anything else from the book that you'd like to share?
Sure. What I'd also like to share is, how can I put this? When you've spent most of your life as part of a couple, I think I just touched on this, you need time to heal and you need that time to become the self that you're going to be on your own. So I would recommend, and this was a mistake I made, was I dated too soon before the person that I was going to become had formed. And that was difficult because there I was dating and I was essentially going through kind of a second adolescence and a real loss of self and identity. So I think it's very important to wait until yourself is formed. And then once you have that, to be extremely selective, self protective. Do not settle for what you do not want. Hold out for what you do want.
Mm.
But
How does
also that love is possible. Love is possible
love
again.
is possible? So how do you know when you've become your new self? Like how does one know that on this journey that, okay, it's time, now it's time. I listened to Debbie and I'm ready.
Well, I mean, some of it's practical. If you're still crying when you're in the aisle at the grocery store, it's not time. If you're sobbing when you're doing the laundry, if every other word out of your mouth, as it was for me for a very long time, was, well, George loved this, George liked that, George and I think it's important to be able to talk about those we've lost, but I think it's a time when we have enough curiosity to be venturing out and looking at a life we want on our own and feeling some happiness on our own. Then I think, when you feel, you're feeling stronger and you're feeling more secure in your own interests and your own identity and your own desires.
Yeah, yeah. So have you found love again?
Thank you for asking, Karen. I did. I did find love again. I've been with my current partner for 4.5 years. We got together about 5 years after my husband passed. And yes. Well,
So this is the new Debbie that's with this gentleman.
I don't know that I changed so dramatically, but before my husband passed, I'd never traveled to Europe, which is crazy, but he hadn't wanted to travel. So I hadn't done that. I never would have thought of going back to school or being as serious about writing as I was for a while when I was getting articles published or working on the book. So I was doing better, and I had a group of women friends in terms of having a more settled, satisfying life on my own.
Yeah. I have a friend that I'm going to give your book to.
Thank you.
I'm going to make a gift of it to her. My husband and I were sitting outside at Starbucks having a coffee, and she walked by, and I looked up and I caught her eye, and she just started crying. You know,
Oh,
just seeing us together made her remember her loss. And I heard that she was, starting to date again. And just what you said, that if you're still crying, just looking at another couple, if that brings tears to your eyes, then probably dating isn't the right thing to do. But I won't make any judgments, of course, but I'm just going to gift her um, your
thank
book.
you.
Yeah.
I hope it's helpful to her. I made the mistake. I was very lonely. My husband and I had led isolated lives. So I was so lonely that I was sort of looking for a new partnership, but it wasn't time for that yet.
Yeah.
That was a mistake I made. And I think I talk about that in the book, but it is a mistake. It is a mistake that I made. And I hope other people maybe learn to be more self-protective.
Yes. Yes. More self-protective, but not so self-protective that you don't give it a try, because here you are in love again.
Yeah,
So
it's worth giving it a try. Yeah, I am in love again. We did fall in love. Now we've been together 4.5 years, so we moved in a little over a year ago. So we're transitioning from that love in being in love phase to the best friend forming a life together phase. It's kind of funny when that initial glow wears off, but it's wonderful.
that's good. I am so glad. I am so glad to hear that. So one of the things that we like to do in the show, I didn't know it was a show till somebody told me it was a show. Someone said, "Can I be on your show?" And I said, "Oh, do I have a show?" But on my video podcast is we like to recommend books, and it could be anything, anything. It doesn't have to do with your book, but it could, and helping people. But so we want to just share some good books. And you took this course, you went back and got your MFA. Were there books that really influenced you or helped you through this or made a big impact on you?
Well, when I was grieving, I did read On Grief and Grieving by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and David Kessler, and that was somewhat helpful. It was a little dry for me. I wanted a book that felt more like a hug. The books that I was reading when I was really sad were MFK Fisher, her books about food, and Laurie Colwin, also a food writer, but also a novelist and short story writer. And those were books I'd read in my childhood. MFK Fisher in particular, my dad had introduced me to her work and we used to talk about it. So those were the books I returned to because those were books that had offered me comfort when I was younger. And they just felt warm and not too hard to read, but really lovely with beautiful images and other people at least having some joy that I could read about.
That is that's very, very good. And if you could have a cup of tea or coffee or a glass of wine or a
Hmm.
shot of scotch with
Yeah.
with a character from one of your favorite books, or a glass of milk, since a lot of them were in your childhood. Is there somebody that you would love to just sit down and have a conversation with?
Well, I would say MFK Fisher. Now she's not a character. She wrote her books, but she wrote, first person kinds of
Mm,
memoir. I mean, if you read a lot of her books, they have recipes, but it's really memoir. Um, and yeah, I would have loved to. She actually lived fairly near me for years. Her daughter even worked where I went to undergrad, Mills College, but there was that. So I was always just admired her from a distance.
and what a good choice, because then maybe she would make you something tasty.
That too. I mean, she always talks about nice wine. So yeah, maybe she would offer a nice glass of French wine and a lovely piece of homemade tart. That would be wonderful.
Yes, that would be very, very good. And in addition to the books that you've mentioned already, is there any other book that you've read recently in your new life that you might like to share?
Well, one thing I do enjoy is I belong to a monthly book club,
Mm,
and it's about 7 women. Viewers show up sometimes, and we pick different kinds of books. And it isn't my usual kind of book, but we read Ordinary Grace by William Kent Kruger,
mm.
and it was just beautiful. It reminded me a little bit of To Kill a Mockingbird, and the writing was amazing. I read a lot of books, and with an MFA, you go, not enough interiority. I can't tell what the character's thinking. What's their motivation? This is going too quickly. I mean, there's all kinds of better words I could think of. You just critique, and the writing is like, oh, okay, that's a cliche. Yeah, I wouldn't put that together. But the writing was exquisite. I mean, I could just go and just read certain sentences, and so I would say that one.
Wonderful. That's a great. Thank you so much for that recommendation. So, if our readers, listeners, a lot of almost everybody that watches are readers, but I also have a lot of writers who
Mhm.
watch as well. If they wanted to find out more about you, they wanted to find your book, some of your other writing, how could they be in touch with you?
I hope they do. You can find me on my website, thehungoverwidow.com. That used to be a blog. I have all my blog content still there. So you can find me on my website, thehungoverwidow.com. Info about the book is on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, all that good stuff. And you can also buy it at an indie bookstore, which is important, of course. And it's available wherever books are sold. You can also find me on Facebook on Debbie Weiss author page. My author page, I post a lot. I have a lot of lively conversations. I talk about the book, but I also talk about recovering from grief and dating as a midlife person.
Excellent. All right. Please go find her. Please go check out her book. And we hope that that you will do the same. There's the book
There's the
available
book.
as is. And I hope you will also, um, like her. Or if you follow her Facebook page, put a little like there. If you're following her on Amazon, click follow. You'll get information. And I hope you'll do the same for me, KarenEOsborne.com. And on Facebook, Karen E. Osborne Author. And I'm on YouTube and Instagram. And oh my goodness, we spend so much time on social media, it takes away from our writing.
It
But we,
does.
yes, we thank you so much for watching. And I hope that you'll be here next time for What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Take care, everybody.